Thank you very much, Kirsty. I should start off with an apology. To protect the credibility of the panel, I should say that you need to imagine I'm a woman. Sue Sharland hoped to be here today, our female president of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation, but she very much regrets she's not here, so I'm standing in for her. CIHT is very focused on diversity, which I'll come on to in a minute. But I hope that what I've got to say doesn't come as a surprise to you. The industry, the sector, we have a skills problem. We have a diversity problem. And we have an efficiency problem. And of course, in today's politically correct world, I need to describe those as challenges rather than problems. But those are challenges that we need to face. In my day job, working for a small procurement consultancy, I'm working with some of those major clients that Kirsty described, HS2, Crossrail, Highways England, those big public sector organisations with very big programmes of work. They're all fishing in the same pool in terms of the resource requirements they need, in terms of having on board the skills that are going to be needed to deliver this major programme of work that the government is seeking to be delivered. And of course, they're all requiring the same A-teams from the same suppliers. So there's a great need to address the skill shortage, to address the coordination of the programmes. So there's those three challenges. The skills, yes, the skills gap is a major delivery challenge. There's some statistics there. You can argue about, there'll be other people quoting other statistics, no doubt, but Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation has done a survey of its corporate partners, major organisations in the sector. 96% of those identify a skill shortage. What surprises me, I suppose, is that 4% don't. Age profile, 20% of the workforce expected to retire in the next 5 years. And with some specialist skills, the problem is even greater in that respect. There were fewer numbers coming into the industry than leaving. Only 25% are women, less than 10% are of ethnic minority background. And of course, that's without considering the new skills that are going to be required across the sector in terms of technology rather than some of the traditional skills. So skills is a real problem. If you don't recognise it, you will become aware of it soon. And of course, we need to bring in more skills, but we're very much restricted by the failure to attract a more diverse workforce. Again, some of those statistics, 90% of the workforce and management is white, 90% at management and board levels are held by men. So to support greater diversity and inclusivity within the sector, we've produced a new toolkit that's aimed at attracting more women and other minorities. It's aimed at getting more women up to board level positions, and it's aimed at addressing barriers to diversity. How is that toolkit being produced? Well, we've consulted with our corporate partners, as I said, a wide range of major companies operating within the sector, both consultants and contractors. They've identified good practice case studies. The toolkit is designed to be a practical guide as to what might be done to improve diversity, and it highlights the benefits of a diverse workforce if you're looking to build a business case to put in place some of these measures. It's a living document. If you have other ideas of what might be done in terms of future editions, then there's an opportunity there for it to add your name to the list of contributors within the document. And finally, yes, we need more skills, but of course we also need to be making sure that we're making more efficient use of the resources that we currently have. We need that longer term planning. Yes, I think the government is starting to realise the benefit of longer term planning, but we need that greater commitment of funding to allow the supply chain to put in place the resources that is needed for those future delivery programmes. We need those programmes to be coordinated so that we're making most efficient use of those resources. And we need clients to improve their capability so that they understand what resources they need in-house and what resources they're needing from the supply chain. I'm particularly keen to promote the idea of early contractor involvement and how we get integrated delivery teams in place earlier, which allow individual companies to plan and recruit the resources they need. And finally, I would just say that the whole approach to delivery within the sector needs to be supported by collaborative arrangement. So for CIHT, those are the three key areas: understanding the skills gap, getting greater diversity, and making more efficient use of resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from Johal, who is the Human Resources and Organisation Development Executive Director at Highways England. San has senior level HR experience in a number of sectors, including environmental sciences, utilities, retail and aviation. She joined Highways England in November last year as Executive Director of Human Resources and Organisation Development. Her remit covers the HR function right across the business, including learning and development, resourcing, reward and organisation development. San.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? So I haven't got a number of slides to present from. I was hoping just to share a couple of high-level points with you, and hope that will stimulate some debate later on. As per the introduction, that was a great introduction, whoever wrote that. I am the HR Director for Highways England. I've been around for about a year now, so a large proportion of that year was taken up with the move to Highways England as the government-owned company, so that transition from Highways Agency to Highways England. And I think it's fair to say, and I'll be very honest with you, those first 6 months were very internally focused for us as an organisation, given the transformation that we were needing to go through and continue to go through. But having said that, all of that transformation was with that backdrop of the increase in investment that we're now facing as a shared challenge. So for those of you who don't know the statistics, I'm sure you all do, but we're now dealing with a tripling of annual investment on the strategic road network, so from circa 1.5 billion to around 4 billion per annum. So how do we respond to that challenge? Well, it's a shared one, first and foremost. So as the client organisation, I don't see that we have any great magic wand in this area. We all are also looking to see how we can cope with the challenges around skills, resource and capacity. But I think there's maybe still some room, and I spoke at an event probably 12 months ago where I said some of the same things, because I don't think as a client and client organisation and supply chain organisations we've properly tackled this, but I think there is room for us to look at this challenge and look at how we might tackle it together. So what are we doing as Highways England? Well, we don't have the monopoly on recruiting and attracting the most talented individuals, as you all know, any of you who know about our organisation when we were the Highways Agency. But we are trying to actively work to boost our capabilities in particular areas. So what we're not doing is taking the whole gambit and saying, right, we need to increase our talent and we need to increase our skills in all areas. We're taking quite a prioritised view of the world. So you would imagine that we are looking to upskill in the areas of project and programme management. We have to do that to respond to the increase in investment. And we're also looking to boost our skills and capacity in areas such as commercial and contract management, as well as then some of the deep, what I call the deep specialisms, so geotechnical engineering and structural engineering. And we haven't had a lot of success in the past in recruiting into some of those specialist disciplines, mostly because we haven't been able to pay the rates of pay that those specialisms are demanding. So we're having to get really quite creative, and I mean really quite creative, about how we go and attract those people and get them to come and stay with us, as well as retain the ones that we've already got. So we're doing lots of work around that, but in order to help that thinking, we're spending a lot of time on workforce planning. So for any of you who are in the HR field or line managers or senior leaders who take responsibility for that workforce planning, you will know that that requires quite a lot of strategic thought and headspace to really get clear about the capabilities and skills you need to be able to deliver your business objectives. So I make no apologies for the fact, actually, that as the client organisation, we're spending a lot of time on that at the moment, so that we don't have a scattergun approach. We are being much more targeted and specific about where we spend our precious time in terms of upskilling the organisation and the capabilities we need to bring in. So I thought that was important to share, because that might be something that you want to contemplate. It might be something that you've already done successfully in your organisations, and if that's the case, then I'd be really interested in a chat. Other things that we're doing are probably the same as what you're all thinking about. So early talent into the organisation, we're focusing quite heavily on apprenticeships and graduate schemes, and of course we'll all know about some of the apprenticeship targets we've been handed down by government as a sort of sector, and how do we respond to that. So there are a number of people in our organisation who are working across the supply chain trying to respond to that stretching target, but internally we're also looking to grow our own early talent pools in terms of graduates and apprenticeships. We're also targeting, like I said, our resourcing activities in specialist areas where we can. And we're playing our part in the industry-wide groups, such as the Infrastructure Skills group that has been launched and is run by the DFT. So what should the industry do? I'm not going to stand here and preach at some very knowledgeable people who are operating in the industry on a day-to-day basis, but here's just some thoughts from me. I think it's a shared problem. We need to remember that first and foremost. And actually, I think that there's something we need to do, which we've uncovered quite early around this need to be creative about getting skilled people in. There's something we need to do to raise the profile of a career in this industry, because it's still seen as or maybe, but actually there's something way more attractive over there that I'll rather go and spend my time on. And actually, are there some barriers to entry into this industry that we haven't quite tackled? So safety, I think, is probably the most obvious elephant in the room. What can we do to tackle some of the safety concerns that people might have about entering a career in this industry head on, so that we're taking that away as a barrier to entry? Just an idea. There are some other things I think we can do together, and that's responding to the apprenticeship target, which we're on with, hopefully, and your organisations hopefully are thinking about that. And also, I think we can collectively, drawing on some points made in the last presentation, we can collectively try and hunt for talent in those hard-to-reach areas, those non-traditional areas that wouldn't necessarily spring to mind when we first start thinking about addressing our skills gap. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Lots to talk about there. I like the emphasis on, just let's be quite clear, this is a shared problem. This is not Highways England's problem. We've just got this massive expansion. We don't have the staff to deal with it, either in terms of engineering, commercial capacity, or whatever. So we'll talk about that in a little bit of time. But let's now talk to John Donegan, who's the chair of the Road Task Group with Britpave. He has got more than 30 years' experience in pavement construction, graduating as a civil engineer from Trinity in Dublin. He spent 25 years with SIAC Construction, becoming technical director for Bardon Composite Pavements in 26, and set up as an independent pavement engineering consultant in 2013. He was a founder member of Britpave in 1991, which is a bit like Britpop, except for pavements, and is the current chairman of its Road Task Group. So, John.
Slight technical hitch, Kirsty here. I think, oh, here we go. I've arrived.
It's okay. This is the day of technical hitches.
Yes. Okay. Industry is in full agreement, really, that the traditional resource pool for road construction will struggle. In other words, there isn't sufficient asphalt capability to meet the planned programme that is on the table over the next few years. So what I would like to do is to share with you some concrete idea, and it's not a complete pun, about how sensible pavement design can help to deepen this resource pool. And what I will be talking about really very quickly is how the use of HBM and concrete pavements can help meet this challenge. HBM, hydraulically bound mixtures, well, they can be used as sub-bases, yes, but they can also be used as lower bases in the pavement. And the good news is that HBMs use lower grade aggregates than asphalt. So you've got a much wider pool of aggregate to choose from. You also use indigenous binders such as cement and fly ash rather than imported bitumen. Mobile mixing plants can be taken to the site where they're needed rather than talking about fixed locations. And high compaction pavers are now becoming increasingly available in the industry to lay this material. The result of these flexible composite designs is a reduced asphalt demand by 50% typically. It's not to eliminate asphalt, but it's more to make the use of asphalt more efficient. In this case, with flexible composite designs, you double the area of pavement that you can achieve per tonne of asphalt. So concrete then as a further option, concrete pavements are thinner first of all, which means you use less raw materials, but there's also a much wider choice of aggregates that are suitable to make concrete. And you can use recycled concrete, for example, in new concrete pavements. Again, indigenous cement is the binder rather than imported bitumen, and mobile concrete plants can be taken to where they're needed. Slip-form paving equipment is used, which might otherwise be used in airfields, but it can be added to the resource pool for roads. You might need a thin surface course of asphalt, but that's usually only 35 mil thick, so effectively a 90% reduction in asphalt demand. So, you know, this is going to make the building materials for roads a much bigger resource pool to choose from. What about personnel? And this is a key one perhaps. There's a lot of plant and skilled personnel currently deployed in airfield construction that can be quite easily moved into the road sector. Similarly, you see lots of slip-form concrete barrier and channels. That plant and personnel can easily be adapted to pave concrete pavements. And skills are transferable, laying skills between laying asphalt and HBM. So with a little bit of training, we can help to broaden this resource pool. Materials, not really an issue at all, but I mean, we've got lots of aggregates in reserve, no problem with aggregates, and a much wider spectrum of choice for HBM and concrete. The latest figures I have for cement is that industry domestically can produce around 12 million tonnes per annum. And as I say, the latest figure I have was 8 to 10 million is what we would typically lay or use in the UK at the moment. So we've got sufficient resources that can be brought to play. What are Britpave doing to try and help? Well, we've produced some new guidance in terms of use of concrete in smart motorway construction, and I would recommend this to designers particularly as a sort of a heads up to the options that are available. And what we have to do really about concrete is explode some of the long-standing myths about concrete being expensive and difficult, because it's not really the case anymore. And so this guidance will help highlight key positives and benefits that concrete can provide, and in doing so, widen the resource pool available to designers and contractors.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to hear from Steve Fox, who's the Chief Executive at BAM Nuttall. He's also a CBE, a chartered engineer. He joined BAM Nuttall in 1989, became a member of the Executive Board in 2007 and Chief Executive in 2010. He's a strong supporter of both trade and technician apprenticeships as routes into the industry, and has actively been working with BAM Nuttall's Women at BAM Group to promote career opportunities for women. Steve.
Hi, thanks, Kirsty. Can everyone hear all right? Because when you sat on the stage, I think they've borrowed an aeroplane from City Airport. It's just behind us, so we can't hear anything. Can you hear okay? Yeah. Right. So the exam question, I think, was, does the industry and the highway sector have the capacity and confidence to invest in people, skills, and equipment to meet government ambition? I think the simple, superficial answer is yes. And we always do, despite the hype that we won't or we can't. And of course, the industry relies substantially on the transient European workforce to provide the skills that we don't have in a homegrown environment. But ultimately, we do deliver. Of course, the real answer is much more complex, and we face huge challenges if we really want to have a world of leading infrastructure in a world that's starting to change extremely rapidly. And I think also if we want to change the perception of our industry, and the industry in the whole, certainly the construction industry, has a reputation, a perception at large of being late, over budget, of poor quality, and causing unnecessary and disruptive work. So there's clearly some bigger issues that we do need to get around, and these are linked, I think, to attracting people into our industry. But But I think right now there's a real watershed ahead of us. So I've got just a few observations of the industry. I'm not going to talk about any particular business or what anyone particularly does. But first of all, does the government have a clear and real ambition? Now, yes, we have lots of political statements, but do these translate into commonly understood aspirations? I think the establishment of the Infrastructure Commission is a long overdue step in the right direction, and certainly I think everybody here will applaud that as a good move. But it really needs to work from a blank sheet of paper and not on government directions. And I think we need to be clear that we really help it do that, and it starts to listen to what the future is, rather than carry on having a script led by central government. And of course we need government to implement its recommendations and not just turn them into political matters. And we've seen that already be going on with, you know, the precursor to the Infrastructure Commission, what's happened with the Davis report into airport capacity, where a very clear recommendation is now finding itself in the quagmire up to here about where we go and will we have the courage to take it forward. And then there's a question looking forward about whether the Commission can deal with the really big things. And the big things are the things we don't know about. You know, and perhaps the easy one to talk about in the highway sector is what will driverless cars do in our use and our need for highways. You know, how are we going to get to a stage of agile infrastructure when our whole movements change? The number of vehicles we use changes, the spacings between them changes, the efficiency changes, the ownership changes, the need for car parking changes, and how are we getting ready for these things? There's some really big issues we don't know the answers to, and right now we'll carry on building road and road capacity in the way we have done in the past, and we need to have a far more agile view of the future about how we respond to that. So there's big issues there for government if it's really got ambition. Secondly, big challenge for us is our stifling approach to innovation and new technology. Public procurement, UK design standards, design liabilities, warranties, all these things, step downs, prescription, what we want from public indemnities, just stifle anybody really doing anything new. I thought it was very interesting, wasn't it, this summer? I'm sure a lot of you spotted. Statement from Rotterdam City Council, and the public statement they made. They said they're going to develop and trial asphalt from recycled plastic in conjunction with a contractor. So which UK public authority stood up and said, we're already doing that? There's a real challenge was about how we get our mind around unlocking the blockers to proper innovation and how we really take things forward. Thirdly, of course, our industry is massively fragmented, more so than any other in Europe, and probably more than any other in the world, with, I'm afraid, very low barriers to entry and an obsession with competition. And despite what we say about supply chain relationships and things like this, there's still, and we see it on open book target contracts. Where's my 3 prices? I want to see the lowest price from you. It's really hard to get away from this culture that flows through, this obsession with competition. And this keeps margins very low, risk high, and payment terms nowadays that stop anybody generating cash. Payment terms seem to be constructed to stop people generating cash, the lifeblood of a business, to generate the investment to take the industry forward. So big issues for us there. And that predictable outcome, the consequences of that, entirely predictable. No investment in R&D, really, of any substance. A little bit down the bottom end of the supply chain, but not really big investment in R&D. Little investment in people. Contractors chasing revenue and using the volume to generate profit as opposed to project margin. And not worrying about capacity because we're into this cycle where they just buy it out of the supply chain. So some big challenges there. And the fragmentation also results in no joined up messages, and of course the pressure to keep on message from investor confidence, which moderates what's said. So I think some challenges there for our industry. And then fourthly, the other area to go and look at is our education system, which simply does not produce what the industry and business generally needs. And neither the industry nor the education system inspire school leavers to want to look to us for careers. And it's really sad about how few people look to us. Fantastic industry. I loved my years on site. Absolutely brilliant industry, and yet we still can't inspire people to come in. You look at the average age of people in our industry, it's a sad indictment of where we are. I'm afraid apprentice talks become the latest political hot topic. So now we're going to have a tax to solve the problem. Delighted that's been confirmed today, 0.5% levy on our wage bill. So never mind all the good work done by the CIHT, we're now going to replace that with a tax system. And a lot of the talk really is about academic apprenticeships Again, taking our eye off the immediate problem, which is as much of the problem today as in actually trade apprentices as well. Why are we using the transit European workforce? Because we're not bringing people in to learn the basic trades of our industry. And we just turned the whole thing into a numbers game, apprentices. It's really quite sad. All the targets are about targets, not actually about resolving the issue. And in the short term, you know, the smarter things we can do, if we actually kept engineers engineering, make a big difference. Most engineers, we teach them 3 or 4 years, teach them how to be engineers, and then we're going to get them to do something completely different. And there's, you know, some things that we could look at ourselves about what we do. However, until such time as everything is done by robots, we will need to train real people to undertake real tasks. So there is an immediate problem for us. And the fragmentation of our industry, the extensive use of bogus self-employment, and the lack of direct employment by main contractors really results in very low levels of trade operations and industry promotion of this type of form of employment. I think we've got to look hard at how we go about that as well, because that's right at the root of why we invest so little in those sorts of people. So those are the key areas, I think, just in summary, that I think we need to look at. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we have done it to date. I think the real challenge for us is that the future is going to be very different to the past, and it's an opportunity to actually come at things very differently. And the next 5 years, we've really got to work out how to marshal that and lever it.
Thank you very much. Lots of food for thought and discussion there. And last but not least, Andrew Rowley, who's the Commercial Director Contracting at Tarmac. He joined it in 2005. He previously held senior contracts-based roles with Aggregate Industries and Associated Asphalt. He chairs the Mineral Products Association's Road Strategy Group and is a member of its Asphalt Product Committee. He also sits on various Highways England bodies, including its Collaboration Board and Pavement Efficiency Steering Group. Andrew.
Thank you, Kirsty. Gearing for growth. We've all heard lots of numbers, 15 billion to be spent over the next 5 years. But 1 billion a year, ramping up to 3 or maybe 4 billion a year to be spent. But what we've seen at Tarmac actually has given us some concerns, certainly this year. And I know it's, you know, other companies in our industry. The first half of this year, we were 12% up on volume from the previous year. So, you know, like things were really moving forward. I think in March this year, our contracting business, we were forecasting 3.3 million tonnes that we'd do this year. We're going to now come in at the end of the year just under 3 million tonnes. So that's sort of a shortfall of just over 10% from what we visualised, what we saw and what we thought would come through in the second half of this year. So, you know, from our point of view, you know, we've seen that, you know, that happen, that bit of concern. I think going into next year, certainly the first quarter of next year, we're not expecting much different. And we do think, though, that in the second half of next year, a lot of the schemes that are now getting off the ground, they'll start to happen. We'll then see that volume start to come through. So from our point of view, we actually think it's 2017, 2018 when we're going to see the real change and the real demand in terms of skills and capacity that'll hit certainly the pavement suppliers. I think the main thing, again, you know, we hear a lot about programme visibility being really important, but for us, I think it's programme certainty, which I think is the thing that we need to start sort of focusing on now and coming through. So what have we been doing? Certainly at Tarmac, here's an example. You know, we've invested just under 7 million in a state-of-the-art new asphalt plant just inside the M25 in Hertfordshire. There's a further 3.6 million to be invested to improve the rail links to that plant. So again, you know, it can help meet the capacity that we're going to require on some of the major schemes that are coming forward. I can give you lots of examples, not just from Tarmac, from other companies within the sector that are all doing the same in order to meet that sort of capacity that's going to be coming. The MPA Mineral Products Association, I actually link in with Highways England as a representative from the industry, and we're actually now producing a video which should be with us within the next month. I was chasing it to be done for today, but it can't be. But something will be released certainly within the next month, which actually shows everybody what the industry is doing in terms of gearing up, in terms of capacity. The people side of things, again, from Tarmac's point of view, very much focusing on new apprentices and graduates. You know, we have got an ageing workforce. So, you know, getting in the gangs, we want to employ, again, we want to directly employ. We don't want to meet the demands and the ramp up by the use of more subcontractors. You know, we want to get those people in ourselves and bring them through. So, you know, we're acting on that, and certainly, you know, I think this delay in the ramp up probably will give us that little bit of time more than we expected. Finally, I think for me, a key element is if we're going to deliver the roads programme and we're going to deliver the ramp up when it comes, we need to start doing things differently. We need to start challenging the norm. At the moment, it's sort of common practice that we'll go out on the road at 10 o'clock at night, and when they put the first cone out, and we've got to be off at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we sort of do about 300 tonnes a night, and we've got to do it between 12 o'clock midnight and 4 a.m, so we get one load per lorry. And that's the way we've worked for a number of years. We've got to start doing it differently. We're not going to be able to deliver double that volume by using one load per lorry. It's inefficient, it's not cost effective. We've got to start challenging, and we've got to start extending working windows. We've heard about the 1,000-ton project. I think we've done 1,208, the current record in one overnight shift. But that's all about using, you know, bigger working areas and longer working windows. So we've really got to start making that happen. The reason I've put this slide up, this is a group that was established by David Brewer. So there's sort of every department in Highways England, plus main contractors and pavement suppliers. And we've established this pavement efficiency steering group. And we're really starting to look at the end-to-end. Because if we're going to deliver, I mean, Highways England are going to be judged on delivering that 15 billion and judged on delivering the 1.2 billion in efficiency savings that they're charged to achieve. So from that point of view, what we're targeting is about 500 million through pavements. So what we want to be looking at now is, and this diagram, I know it's a bit busy, but it tries to get across that if we're going to do that, we're going to have to look at it end to end. So starting to look at the best design. You know, now whether that's a concrete base or asphalt, it's whatever's best, you know, and not thinking about do minimum, not thinking about, you know, sort of more for less anymore, really starting to think about whole life costs, because, you know, the efficiency is going to be driven by things lasting longer and doing things differently. So that's really what this model tries to drive. So it's early days, but we really want to sort of, you know, identify where the efficiency opportunities are, get those out into Highways England and its entire supply chain, and then embed those ideas over the sort of course of the next 6 months to a year, and start achieving and obviously measuring what we achieve in terms of efficiency. So 3 key points for me. The first one is programme certainty, and that's going to give industry the confidence to invest. The second one is, as a sector, we are gearing for growth, we are doing it, and in terms of people, capacity, resource. And the third one is, if we're going to deliver this programme and the efficiencies, we need to do things differently and start challenging the things we've always done. Thank you.
Just going right back, and I know there's been the conversation about apprentices today and what Osborne said, but it just strikes me that the masses of things that have changed is when I was growing up, I knew the name of engineers. You were told the name of engineers at schools. Engineers were superstars. You go back to Isambard, Kingdom Brunel, people like that, we knew about them. But now nobody seems to know what an engineer actually does. Kids at school don't know, and yet my grandfathers both went to engineering secondary schools. Schools that were designed for engineers, and I wonder whether or not industry should all get together and start an engineering school once again. I mean, you think that there's going to have to be some huge step change. If you're only taking on 30 apprentices of a workforce of 6,700 and 30 graduates, it's not going to be enough. How do you build huge capacity for how do you get people to be interested in STEM subjects when they're 10?
We are trying, I mean, I was at a careers fair earlier this week. You know, we are trying to sort of engage people younger these days, certainly. But I think the thing, Kirsty, at the moment is that, you know, you don't want to bring too many people in too early. You know, you've actually got to gauge it with your workload. You know, there are parts of our business that are actually been laying people off, you know, so it's just getting it right. I mean, certainly we're putting the things in place, you know, as I say, to get the people in, to get the youngsters in early, and get them through. And, you know, as I say, once we do see the ramp up, hopefully we'll keep that going and
Yeah.
step up that recruitment drive.
I mean, what you seem to be suggesting is thank God for transient European workers.
Well, yeah, completely. I mean, the UK construction industry, although other services businesses, of course, have got a similar situation where they're largely supported by that workforce, particularly for people who do the work.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the trades, that's where they come from. More than 60% of our employees on Crossrail are transit Europeans. And they're great, they work hard, they come here with the right working culture, and they do the jobs, and a lot of them are well skilled. But the sad thing is we're not bringing our own people through. And if you look at the British part of that population, it's ageing and it's not being replenished. But turning to the engineering agenda, of course the STEM agenda is a big thing and there is a more joined up view on that. But of course it's much wider. It's a slow change. But actually if you look at the percentage that go into the construction industry, it's quite small. I mean, engineering is getting broader and broader. And I think this is one of the things we've started to look at how it goes forward. I mean, all forms of contract, but particularly construction contracts, are going to become more and more multidisciplinary. And we have to work out how to actually make them really appealing from the outset to everybody, because we have a far broader range of engineers working on these days to what we had 30 years ago. But we're not making the industry attractive to people, and the schools don't see, and parents don't see the construction industry as a good place to go and work.
And very much, you are very keen, you were saying that the massive problems in terms of the female workforce, ethnic diversity, and what do you think in terms of school can be done about that? Because we are talking about now, if you're going to gear up for the next 10 years, we're talking about getting people now as they go into secondary school.
There is a great need to inspire the current younger generations, and I don't know if we need the Isambard, Kingdom Brunels and the like. I mean, that can help, but I think what we are seeing is that the younger role models are proving to be very effective in encouraging other young members into the industry and into the profession. As an example, within the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation, the percentage of females across our total membership is a very embarrassing 11%. But in the age group of 20 to 30, where we've been actively seeking a recruitment campaign, we've got 25 to 30%. So we are seeing younger people coming in. We're seeing a greater proportion of women. But I think the three stages we need to see improved. There is that inspiration to the younger people going through education. We need to make the industry more attractive to them in terms of letting them see that career opportunities. And then they need to see a greater career path. And clearly, career paths, again, when we're only seeing 10% of females on boards, the career path structure is not working at the moment. So getting rid of some of that unconscious bias within the current organisations to allow females the proper opportunity to get up to senior positions.
Yes, and I mean the broader point is about how you're actually going to deliver the huge demand of you to get these roads done, get these motorways done, never mind what you're actually going to do within your own organisation. So what's your advice to organisations like BAM, Nuttall, to Tarmac, to paving? What's your advice for them to actually think of innovative ways to recruit?
So I wish I had that magic wand. So from our perspective, and we're taking it from our own organisational learnings, is that actually there's absolutely the points that have already been raised. There's something about the early engagement in schools and colleges, which I don't think we're making enough of a concerted, joined up effort around. I think we're probably all delving in that field in different areas, whether it be recruitment events for graduates or social action projects with colleges and schools. We ourselves as Highways England, we've just signed up to an initiative in Birmingham, and Atkins, if there are any representatives in the room, have partnered kindly with us on that. And we're working as corporate coaches for 20 17-year-olds in a disadvantaged area of Birmingham, where we are coaching them through a social action project. And at the same time, we're selling them the idea of a career in our industry. Now, that's 20 young people that we're going to capture, 20 young people that Atkins are going to capture. But actually, if we were to try and take that example and try and multiply it, so we had more infrastructure organisations involved in a partnership approach, we could cover off somewhere like Birmingham and have quite an impact, for example, on some of that early talent, that emerging talent. But There are hotspots, I think, in those age ranges, so you could do something at primary school level even, but we have to feel compelled enough to do it, and that's quite a resource commitment from all of us.
And it's not about graduate. I mean, I know that Osborne's been talking today about graduate apprenticeships, but actually what it is kids going to FE colleges, and the struggle at FE colleges, as we all know, is phenomenal for young kids to be able to get themselves through FE colleges.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, it's not, so our own apprenticeship efforts, we have 74 apprentices at the minute. We have now started to really try and target 50% of those being the technical engineering apprenticeships, rather than maybe the easier apprenticeship routes that organisations took, which was around some of the business admin and more sort of administrative apprenticeships. So we're trying to tackle that head on.
Donegan.
I think we suffer from a historical legacy that the construction industry is not seen as an attractive industry for engineering graduates. A huge number of engineering graduates actually never practice as engineers. They go and work in the city, or they go on into the academic world. And I think if we achieve this critical mass that we're talking about of continuity, not just in roads but in infrastructure generally, I think maybe we'll have a more attractive environment to retain engineers as engineers and not lose them because they don't see a continuous career prospect for themselves.
But you were talking also about stifling innovation, and of course if young people are seeing that there's huge problems in the industry of getting innovation, they're not going to want to be part of an organisation that seems as if it's as much as looking backwards as forwards.
Yeah, I think that's where the big opportunity is, where the watershed is over the next 5 or 10 years, because at long last, I think, we're finally going to have the overdue impact of technology in our industry, and we're going to start to do things differently. I mean, this industry's got to stop doing things the way it's done it for the last 200 years. We're building sites, we still lay bricks, still pour concrete in the same way as we did at the turn of the century. And surely that's going to change substantially. We're going to start to do manufacture very different things off-site, more than manufacture, different sorts of technologies affecting it, as well as different technologies affecting actually what we want, and also starting to build more agile infrastructure in terms of how we're going to change its use. And I think that, along with how our youngsters should see technology impacting our industry, hopefully will provide the catalyst for us to learn how to engage and to use that opportunity to engage with people differently and start to bring them in. Because right now, I mean, we're just stuck.
Questions from the audience now, please. Yes, one there and one right beside, so that's very handy. And then over this side. Let's take first and second.
Hello, Simon Flint, Lagan Construction. If I could just come back with a point and then I'd like to ask my question. I asked a head teacher once, or recently actually, why we weren't attracting more people into STEM subjects. And his response was, it's the quality of teaching. And I don't think he really meant it was the lack of quality, he meant the inspirational side of it. And I would say that therefore, it's incumbent upon us as an industry is to try and supplement that, to try and encourage people into the STEM subjects. So we need to be able to drill down more into the STEM subject as an industry. You're with Laing O'Rourke,
did you say?
I'm with Lagan Construction, far better than Laing O'Rourke.
Right.
But my question now, Kirsty, if that's all right. Yes. I've got four, but
one will do.
One will do.
At the moment.
And it's probably directed as much at Steve as anybody. Yeah. Steve, with your experience, etc., do you think that clients are going to have to change their procurement practices to be able to secure the resources that they require to complete their work?
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm the mic. Sorry. The mic, the only mic.
I certainly think that procurement and delivery strategies, have an important role to play in getting efficient use of resource. We see some very resource-intensive approaches to project delivery, where we're duplicating roles, where we're requiring large numbers of tenderers to produce a lot of work during tender periods, 80% of which proves to be abortive. We've got to look at getting clarity of roles between clients and the supply chain. When there's a shortage of resource, we've got to make sure that clients, have the right capability, but they're not trying to poach resource from the supply chain to build up their own capability, adding to the cost inflation. So, yes, I fully agree that procurement, has a big role to play. Getting that greater collaboration between the parties so there's a better understanding of resources, using techniques that allow suppliers to see a long-term commitment in front of them so they can really plan that resource. They can look ahead 2 to 3 years with firm commitment and to put in place the resources that are going to be needed.
Thank you very much. Pass along, yep.
Yeah, just to add to that, interestingly, about a year ago we attended a workshop all about capacity and resource and skills. And at that workshop, it was full of procurement professionals from the tier ones and that sort of thing, discussing gearing for growth and what we all face. And there wasn't really any tier twos and tier threes there. And I think it's really good that Highways England have recognised the importance of engaging with tier twos and tier threes and starting to talk about some of these things and addressing some of these issues, and it's made such a big difference. And I think things like the Engagement Council, where now these people are coming into it, there's absolutely a place for procurement professionals and people to look at some of the challenges that we face, but I think really good that there's wider engagement now with tier twos and tier threes, and fair play for Highways England for seeing that and addressing it.
Sam, we were just hearing from Bam Nuttall about the whole obsession with competition and the problem, and also all that, the amount of work that has to be done for these contracts. This streamlining, do you understand that from the past that's been a barrier as well?
So I'm not going to profess to try and convince everybody that procurement is my area of specialism. It's not. I spend quite a lot of time talking to David Poole, trying to fathom out what's going on in his head. He's our procurement director, for those of you who know him, and he won't mind me having a little dig. And actually, what I can give you is an insight into, as a senior leadership team, our desire to uncomplicate matters as far as we can. Now, the problem that we have, of course, and it's our problem to try and contend with, is that actually we are the guardians of taxpayers' money. So what we have to do is ensure that we are able to evidence and show our shareholder, the DfT, that we are spending it wisely and we're following all of the rules that are bestowed upon us. However, within that, I'm a big believer in some creativity. And actually, I know it's something that David and the rest of the team are grappling with, and there's obviously some evidence of where we're trying to do things differently.
Would either of you like to come in on that?
Procurement, yeah. Oh dear. I think the simplest observation to make on procurement is, I think we talked about for a long time about it's a huge inefficiency in this industry. I suppose the only thing I would say is, what other industry goes about procurement in the way that we go about ours, where somebody decides what they want. They actually get a couple of engineers in the client organisation to decide what they want. Then they get a bunch of different types of experts to tell them a bit more about what they want. Then they get some procurement experts to tell them to buy it. They get some lawyers to tell them how to write a contract that shovels it all over. And then way down the line, they think, I might go and talk to the person who's going to build it. And is it any wonder why when the builder turns up, he goes, well, your budget's wrong and we can't build it like this, there's a much better way of doing it. It's just bonkers. Now, maybe we deserve it because of the perception of the industry, so maybe we're caught up in that vicious circle. So we can sit here whinging about it. Somehow we've got to all work out how to break that cycle. There are some glimmers of things changing, but, really to get contractor input right upstream, I don't advocate contractors taking over design and taking over other things. I think what you need to do is to get everybody who's going to take an active part in building a scheme involved much earlier, align the objectives so we're all trying to achieve the same things. Everybody at the moment is employed on different models with different incentives. Is it any wonder that you get different outcomes and everybody's got different incentives for what they're delivering? It's pretty obvious. What you put in is what you get out.
And do you take lots of experience away from Crossrail?
I'm trying to see who's here from Crossrail.
It's okay. There's no one listening.
Personally, I think Crossrail was procured in the way it was procured because it was the way to get it built. I don't think there's many people who would say you'd buy Crossrail the way it was bought if you were starting on a blank sheet of paper. Crossrail took 37 years to get onto site. I think decisions were made.
You couldn't really have done anything at the beginning. You were about 10. 15
years ago, when they were taking decisions that were trying to tie people's hands to building it, decisions were taken that probably weren't in the best interest of most economic way of getting the best scheme, but they got us a scheme built. I think if those things hadn't been done 5 years ago when there was a chance for another round of austerity, the scheme could have been stopped.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't criticise why we did what we did. You'd hope that we'd do it differently in the future.
Thank you very much. Question next, please.
Cheers. Thank you. My name's Dave Hill. I'm also from Lagan Construction. I think you've touched on a lot of the points I wanted to make and the question I wanted to ask, which is about skills shortage. I think we've talked about getting new people into the industry, but I think we need to sweat the asset more. I think we've actually got more capacity than we think currently, but I think we're obsessed with man marking and duplication of effort within each individual project. You know, you have a designer designs, and then he checks his own design, and then the client checks his design as well, just in case. And then a contractor will do a piece of work, and then that'll be checked by a cost consultant or by a designer or a site assurance. We're obsessed with checking and double checking, and all that's doing is draining vital resources. For me, what we need to do is think absolutely radically about how we deliver schemes in a manner that actually people on site who are delivering them are only adding value and not doing tasks that actually are just nice to have and just checking. And I don't know how we break this cycle of working in silos where you get a designer, you get a cost consultant, you get a contractor, you get a client, and you get your supply chain, and we're all working in individual silos, man-marking, checking each other. If we can get out of this vicious circle and this cycle, maybe the resources that we demand are actually there.
Right.
The other point I'd like to make is perhaps that environment of always being checked, challenged, is something that's stopping new blood, younger members of graduates coming into the industry, because you know who wants to work in an environment where every single piece of work they do is being challenged or checked by a third party.
Yeah.
And how do we? So the question I ask is, how do we get out of this vicious circle?
I was going to say, well, you take a leaf out of the Hatton Garden Robbers book. They didn't need much checking. They just get through quite fast. Maybe we should employ them for Crossrail. So how do we get out of this vicious cycle? Sorry, I ask a question and I'm expecting an answer, but there's silence.
Steve mentioned earlier early contractor involvement. I'm a strong advocate for that, because I think it brings the best out of the team if you get the contractor and the designer talking to each other early, bring in innovation early, and share resources and save resources.
Yes. Can that be sorry, this is a question again born out of ignorance. Can that be mandated by Highways England, that actually there should be a new model which says you have to bring the contractor on board early? I mean, is that possible?
I would like to think so, but that's my ignorance again in this area. So, I would like to start from a position of why not, and then let's figure out what the barriers are.
Yeah. Can that be mandated?
Mandated?
Well, can that be forced to happen?
Yeah, I think that sorry, the point I was trying to get across in terms of looking at things differently and trying to drive that efficiency is something that is recognised, and it is about challenging the way we've always done things, and whether it is that design or whether it is the way that we engage. So there's forms of contract which you can see in Steve. There's frustrations in the way things currently work. So I think we're all agreeing, but I actually do think that opportunity is there for us to. You're absolutely right. There's obviously reasons that things have developed in a certain way. So there's things you've also got to guard against. You can't just suddenly, rip it up and do something completely different. But we've got to do better than we have been doing, and we've got to, if we're going to deliver these efficiencies, we're going to deliver this program. We really are going to have to start moving quickly, be agile, and start making some of the things happen. So I think everybody would agree with you that there's opportunity there to take a lot of waste and a lot of cost out of the system.
Gentleman there, yes.
I'm asked to stand up. I'll introduce myself, Rien Huurman from the Netherlands, Royal BAM in the Netherlands, and I perhaps have a suggestion. In the Netherlands...
Could you put the mic really close?
Closer to my mouth.
That's
okay,
better.
whoa.
No, we like that.
In the Netherlands, we have a system that is quite different from the system that apparently you guys here have in the UK. In the Netherlands, a contractor might be responsible for a road that he has paved for a period of 20 or 30 years. As a result, the contractor itself is going to design the road. construct the road, produce the asphalt. Everything is in one house. There is no lag and check and recheck and overcheck and whatever. You get quite an effective way of constructing and maintaining roads. That is a suggestion. I also have a question with respect to the cement as an option for asphalt. Asphalt is a flexible material. As a result of that, it can cope with settlements and it can cope with temperature differences. And you pay for that in terms of rutting. Asphalt is sensitive to rutting. Concrete is a rigid material. It doesn't deform. That's why we build bridges from concrete and roads from asphalt. If you build roads from concrete, you're vulnerable to reflective cracking. And I'm very keen in how you solved the problem of reflective cracking when you use concrete as the main bearing structure of a pavement. So one suggestion and a question.
Okay.
Pick up the check from Tarmac at the end.
Pick up the check from Tarmac. But then presumably, under European rules, you'll be actually coming in after some of these contracts. So you'll want to bring your Dutch system. Oh God, you'll want to bring your Dutch system in. No, oh no, you're not allowed to. And they're not allowed to. So we're all. You don't feel like you can come in. That's interesting. Yes. Steve, sorry.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the PPP program, which of course we launched in the UK, and then we decided we fell out of love with it. And actually in the Netherlands, of course, they picked it up and we do a lot more of it. But actually it is interesting, there is a very different business model outside of the UK. John Armitt reflected on it on his inaugural speech as president of the ICE, where the UK is the only place where design and contractors are basically kept separate. And elsewhere, and so I know obviously in Royal BAM in Holland we do just that we do in-house design, in-house surfacing, so our surfacing is not subcontracted out. It's a whole different approach. It's got far more vertical alignment within the supply chain, which we don't do in the UK. We've tried to separate it all.
Okay, let's talk about concrete versus tarmac.
It's not me.
One of the
Okay, we're going to do it in 30 seconds.
Well, the questions that you raise are technical issues, really. And in flexible composite pavements in the UK, we have beaten the reflection cracking problem by putting induced cracking in the HBM bases. So that's not an issue anymore for us in the UK. And in relation to concrete pavements themselves, well, the only concrete pavements that have been built in the UK in the last 10 years or more have a thin asphalt surface on. But the pavement underneath is continuously reinforced, so there aren't any cracks. So we believe technically we've beaten that.
Thank you very much indeed. Coming over this end for a quick comment and a hand up there, so let's get the microphone there.
Yeah, just a quick point on the collaboration between the English and the Dutch road authorities. When I was working at the Highways Agency, we established a collaborative working arrangement between the Dutch Rijkswaterstaat and English Highways Agency. And the original PFI DBFO program was developed in the United Kingdom, and the Highways Agency shared their thinking on PFI development with the Rijkswaterstaat, which led to the development there. So I think that's one good example of where there was very effective collaboration to take that forward.
And then we ditched it. Yes.
Thank you. Matt Atkinson from BAM Nuttall. So I'm speaking carefully because my boss is on the stage. So we've heard some interesting comments about how our Dutch colleagues think about quality of the build, perhaps above all else, because it's obviously important to their business model. Dave alluded to the man-marking habits we have in our industry. Steve picked up on the low entry requirements to industry. You know, man, white van, bag of cement is a civil engineer. And somewhere in the middle of all that must be a question about how do we get our clients, and our particular client in Highways England, to really value the quality of work that we can all produce, as opposed to the cheapness or the drive down of our price in which to do it. So the question to the panel is, how do we encourage our client to think about quality above all else, which will help everything drop into place?
Yep. Okay?
Yeah, give us something else.
Oh, no, you're the boss. Pass it down the end if you like to, yeah.
Well, actually, just coming in on that point, I think it's a great question. And actually, I think, just from speaking from the client organisation's point of view, I think some of what's going to drive that is some of the thinking around customer service, believe it or not, which is actually, you know, if we start to frame the question in a different way, we'll actually start to open up our minds to some different way of thinking, which isn't just cost-driven. So we have been criticised in the past as an organisation about caring more about the asset than we do about the customer. And I dare say some of that would have been born out of a drive for efficiency around cost and looking at the bottom line on some of these procurement exercises, rather than actually something might cost a bit more or it might take a bit longer, but actually for the customer it's the best thing to do. And I honestly believe that takes us to a different view around quality and the quality of what's being produced, rather than being driven by the bottom line.
Thank you very much indeed. Bring it over here. Yep.
Yeah, I think that we are starting to see an acknowledgement of the importance of whole life costs, and and I think that I absolutely agree that definitely I think Highways England would acknowledge that certainly mistakes have been made in recent times about some of the contracts and the way those contracts have been awarded, and that's why probably if you think about what's gone on this last year or two in terms of asset support contracts and that haven't been awarded, and so at least they've stood up and not been prepared to award something that might not be right. So I think that certainly from our point of view, we are seeing an acknowledgement that, and some of the work that we're doing is around better materials, about better design, and this absolute move away from just more for less and that sort of attitude. So that's what I believe is the case.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And at this stage, I'd like to thank our panel who have been absolutely expert and also expert with the microphone. Thank you very much to Kier as the sponsor of this event. That ends the content for now in the Macdonald Theatre for today. But once you leave this space,